Yo, 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 welcome to Crate 808, and today we dive back into the greatest 3 album runs in hip-hop history, and today is a big one because we are talking Dilla Dog J Dilla with writer, professor, former music executive, author. Can we say New York Times best-selling author yet, Dan?
You can say it, actually. This will be the first time.
New York Times best-selling author Dan Charnas is in the house, and I'm sure, as most of the heads who listen to this show know, Dilla Time, the book, is out and it is ruling timelines in 2022. Can I just say, Dan? So, congratulations, man.
Thanks, man. Thanks, but it's nice coming into like your space. Feels like home territory, where we can really nerd out and talk about James Yancey.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So people go check out the book because the book is it was needed. We will go into why it was needed later, but we're going to talk a little bit today about Dilla's 3 album runs, and they can go all over the place. You can go to Fantastic, you can go to The Shining, but I'll try to pick 3 here that I thought would work quite well, just talking about Dilla and maybe a few things that haven't been discussed about Dilla as much. So we're going to talk about Welcome to Detroit, Ruff Draft in the middle, Donuts, and The Shining. So with those 3, we're going to go in. But before we do, Dan, I've got to ask everyone, what's the least hip-hop thing you've done in the last 24 hours, man?
Oh, man. What's the least? Being who I am, everything I do is hip-hop. Even when I make dinner, even when I walk my son to and from school, there's a little hip-hop in it.
I love it.
So, maybe watching Seinfeld bloopers, I think probably. That is my sort of my comfort, my guilty pleasure comfort zone where I just forget everything and I just,
love it.
Watch these craft people crack themselves up.
Yo, quick reminder, if you're enjoying the show, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button so you'll be kept up to date with all that we're doing. And also, man, get involved in the YouTube comments. Man, we love hearing from you fellow hip-hop heads. We love nerding out. So bring those takes and just bring that flavour, man, and we might even shout you out on the show. So yes, appreciate all the support. Now, back to the episode. Bloopers is a great way to go. It's the Office UK man. Bloopers are my go-to. That's kind of get rerun every 6 months or so. We get a rerun of those. Yeah, love it. Love that. Right. Okay. Yes, you are very hip hop. And this is again one of the reasons I want to talk to you, because of the book is out, but also this album run. I was thinking with this book, I've not seen. It's very comprehensive. It's got. God, man, you incorporate what? Music science, you incorporate technology, urban city planning, history of America and history of pop music and history of hip hop music in America. So you showcase all that. And I think it's just been a very amazing journey to see how one young boy has grown up to then do all of what he did, and then you translate it and synthesize it all into this kind of, I don't know, there's just so much feeling, man. It's incredibly open, people. You will see honesty in there. I think fairness, a very human story. Humans are fallible. Humans are multidimensional, and they are all those things in this. And I just want to say thank you, Dan, man, because some of this history could be lost or lost to the annals of memory, where sometimes we don't remember. Was that a rumor? Was that a myth? So to have it finally collated and the interviews you have on there, I just want to say thank you, man, because just to celebrate this history has been documented, man. Absolutely, man.
Yeah. It's really lovely of you to say that. And frankly, I do feel a certain responsibility, right? That there could have been a shorter version of this book. I realize I tend to write long anyway. But I also felt like there are a couple things going on there. First of all, there's a vital constituency. There are a couple of vital constituencies I needed to serve. And even though I wanted to explain Dilla Time to the rest of the world, the book had to read in many ways as a story. I also had to really answer some questions that Dilla fans have had for a long time. I couldn't not go into the details of Got Till It's Gone and, things like that. But also because I think not only musicians lately, Black musicians especially, and hip hop musicians, in particular, do not get grand historical contextual treatments. So I felt like if anybody from our world deserved that and could live up to that, I thought it was James Yancey. So, I just did it. How we did it big. We had to do it big.
You did, man. You did. And from the cover to the push you've been doing promoting it, it does make you feel like this Dilla month in 2022 has been special. It feels special, and you're part of that, man. You're part of it. Great. I think there's just been more dialogue over Dilla as well, just generally, because the book has sparked that, right? And I don't want to wait too much on you. I don't want to gas you up too much, but it is that point where you think this is amazing that one book has done this, and I felt it felt very special to me. But I thought cutting into it, I think for me, you hear all these different versions of why people love J Dilla, what he did different to everyone else. And there's a lot of myth around all of that. There's a lot of technical speak that maybe the layman doesn't get and gets bored of hearing about 2-time and 4-time and all this. But for me, I remember when Questlove said, he said it brilliantly. It's like, give a baby 2 tequila shots to put a drum machine in front of it. And I thought that was a really interesting, straight to the heart of it. Oh, right. Okay. I get kind of an idea of how weird it is to be this good. But as there is all this technical talk to it, I thought for you, what was the actual impact? For the layman, what was the actual impact of Dilla on music and hip hop music especially? What would you say?
Sure. Well, hip hop, Dilla was one of a generation of hip hop producers in the 1990s who were excellent at their craft. And he did come from a particular strain of hip hop production that I sort of nicknamed Beats and Beauty, right? It's a very harmonically driven, lush kind of hip hop production that started, I argue, with Q-Tip and Tribe Called Quest, but that Preem was certainly a part of, that Diamond D was certainly a part of, Large Professor was certainly a part of, and that Dilla was a part of. And when we related to him being in hip hop in the 1990s, we related to him as that, he's just this dope, incredible, dope producer from Detroit, this bang beats, the Ummah, Q-Tip, part of that collective. But since in the latter part of his career, and then since his death, he has had sort of both an outsized kind of sentimentality and worship on one hand, and an outsized influence. And the worship part has been documented very well, but the influence and innovation part had not.
Yo, yo, yo. Us here at the Crate 808 podcast have kicked off our Patreon. So if you don't know what Patreon is, it's a platform where you can go and for a small donation, you can help support us make more hip hop content for you. Go on to patreon.com/Crate 808 and you can check out all the little payment options you've got there. You can check out the 2 new episodes you'll be getting every month, live chats with us guys, just to rap nerd out with you guys. We're going to go into some wide-ranging episodes, delving into the work of the Wu-Tang Clan, MF Doom, and J Dilla. So get it locked if you want that new granular look at hip hop. So go to our payment tiers on Patreon, big up yourselves. If you choose to support us, thank you so much. I will give you a personalised shout out on the show, and we shall catch you in one of these live rooms and let's get this community going. So spread the word. Much love for your time and peace out. Boom.
And there wasn't a lot of great language to why Dilla remained this sort of figure who people celebrated and why his drum machine is in the Smithsonian. And I know all the emotional reasons for that. Like the story of his death in 2006, is a lot of pathos and a lot of very evocative. He's also symbolic of a forgotten era of, a forgotten producer from a forgotten era of hip hop.
Yes.
But he actually did change music in a fundamental way. An innovation of that's worthy of like 100-year cycle, right? Of centenary proportions, as I've said. And that is that he invented a new time feel, a new way to feel musical time. And so the way that I explain it for the layman is this. European music, for most of its history, was rhythm was counted evenly. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that is how music was notated. That is how music was played. In the 20th century in America, because of the presence of Africans and their descendants on the continent, there evolved a new time feel that was in some way a retention of African polyrhythm. So instead of straight, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, it was swung, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. It's uneven instead of even, uneven beats. So our popular music has been populated by these two time feels and the continuum between them, right? Straight and swung. And our popular music contains examples of both. Like if you listen to Bohemian Rhapsody at around the 4-minute mark, Freddie Mercury goes from this mock opera, which is straight time, no, 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 right? And then after he sings For Me, right? Then it goes into this rocking, swinging, uneven beat. That's the difference, straight and swung. And that didn't change. Even when James Brown did his funk innovations, you could swing funk or you could make it straight. But in 1997, 1998, in a basement in Detroit, on a drum machine, James Yancey found a way to collide straight rhythms and swung rhythms, multiple strands of straight and swung elements, and put them in conflict with each other, so that there was this bit of rhythmic friction, things that didn't seem like they made sense together, right? And we tried to put language to that. Oh, drunken, sloppy, limping, loping, stumbling.
Yes.
And that is inaccurate language. It's how we feel. But what he is actually really doing is putting straight rhythms and swung rhythms in conflict with each other, microrhythmic conflict. And that really had not been done before as more than a momentary thing in our popular music. And it might not have been important, except that other programmers started imitating the feel, like High Tech, like the folks who worked at Touch of Jazz, Jazzy Jeff's,
for sure.
assembly line in Philadelphia. And then traditional musicians like Questlove and D'Angelo and Pino Palladino, and then Robert Glasper. So the time feel starts to move out into the world in ways that are truly profound. And yet, when people start to write about this time feel in the teens, right? Jay Dee is like reduced to a footnote or not even talked about at all.
That's mad. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the impetus. Like, okay, this is why we need to write this thing.
Yeah.
From a musical scientific point, as well as the biographical point.
The way he had shit EQ, the way that it was programmed, the feeling of it was the most authentic feeling. He was programming it, but it just felt live. The swing of it, his time signature on that, the way that he had like the swing percentages on his beats and shit, like the way he just the way he had the music partitioned. He had bass where it needed to be, the kick was where it needed to be, the hi-hat was where it is, the music, he was just clean. Yeah. You know what I mean? But still had he had an understanding of it that he could manipulate it any way that he wanted to. You know what I mean?
Yes, it was in Fantastic Volume 2. You said that this was the inflection point when you get that Dilla feel that everyone talks about. I wanted to know, for you, in your words, what is that Dilla feel? What was that first feeling you got? Was it uneasiness? What was that feeling when you first heard these odd swings and,
Well, for me personally, right? Everybody has their own language put to it. And it took me a while to really understand, it's straight and swung against each other. That came much later. How I did it as just as a fan, Chino XL, and I was an A&R and executive and producer for Warner Brothers Records. And Chino XL and I flew to Detroit in 1999 to work with Jay Dee. And in preparation for this, he sent us a beat tape. This is sometime in early 1999.
Right.
I have also by this time heard Fantastic Volume 2, right? It hasn't come out commercially yet. I'm just hearing like an advanced CD that his manager gave to me. And this beat CD, this beat tape actually that he gave me is now called another batch, right? It's
Right.
referred to on YouTube when you see it as another batch. And we picked Chino's 2 beats from that beat tape. And we go to Detroit, we make the songs, we fly back to LA. And it isn't until a few months later when we're mixing the album, it's got to be late 1999, early 2000, when I'm listening to the mix down of one of the songs, Don't Say a Word, and I'm having this moment. I'm like, what's going on with that hi-hat? Like, is that hi-hat swinging? Something sounded off. Okay, so for me, it was something's wrong, something's off.
Yeah.
And this is after I've been listening to this thing for months.
Yeah.
Okay? So I take it into my studio onto my digital performer, like a digital audio workstation. And I put the song in, and I line the waveform up with the grid of the time grid of the computer.
Mm-hmm.
And I realize that the hi-hats are not swung. They're perfectly straight. What's happening to me is an aural illusion. The snare is early. So there is a long short pattern that's happening between the snare and the kick. The snare comes too early. So it's kick snare, kick snare, kick snare, right? But the hi-hats are remaining even, straight. So the quickness of the snare is tricking my mind into thinking that the hi-hats are moving when they're not. It is literally an aural illusion.
Wow.
And then all the questions go, why is he doing that? How is he doing that? Why does it sound good? And then High Tech and Quali come out with the blast. And then the same thing is happening there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're hearing Music Soul Child, Just Friends.
Yes.
Same thing is happening there. You're hearing Voodoo. You're hearing. So then I begin to hear this influence spread out.
Yeah.
So that was that point for me
Right.
of just, what is that? The intellectualization of it came later for me.
Oh man, fascinating. Yeah, because I remember hearing the Music Soul Child and thinking, why do I love this? So I loved Music Soul Child when it came out, and then you trace it back and think, oh yes, that's why. So again, you're articulating things that haven't been articulated as well, and these things in your book do that. There's another thing I think you said that this was a moment in his career. We will get to Welcome to Detroit in a minute, but I was going to say that it's the context of Welcome to Detroit that makes Welcome to Detroit so big for me. And it's all this where you say he was finding the holy in the broken, which I found a really interesting way of putting it, where you're finding the imperfections in spaces and silences and stuff like that. And these are little, I love geeking out like that, man. And just you get into that granular space was amazing. So you talk about Dilla's Basement. Before we move in, though, I've got to ask you, because I love the whole idea of environments in hip hop. So I think Bun B talked about when UGK came out, that the car wash was massive where they were, and that's where the community was. And then you have the corner, and then you have the streets. And Detroit has basements, and I find it really interesting how the music sounds different, because as well they do make it in a basement. For you, can you just describe Dilla's Basement to me? That's what I wanted to ask.
I mean, what I remember is just sort of images. So I remember driving up to Conant Gardens, parking on McDougal, which is this side street off of the main drag, Nevada, and the front door of the house faces Nevada. There's a barren field across from the house, and I remember parking along that, and then seeing, I guess we were told to knock on that side door, the white door. So it's this one-story red brick ranch house with a white door right in the middle of it. And we knock on the door. I forget who answered it. It could have been Marine, You walk in the door, to the right is the kitchen, right? And then there's steps downstairs to the left. So you walk down to the left, like immediately go down to the left.
Yeah. You
get down there. And when we got down there, Common Sense was down there, just hanging out. Like, what's Common Sense doing here? I remember it being relatively dark, it wasn't dark, but it was, wasn't like extremely well lit. There was a bar on the northern side of the room where he put his drum machines and turntables. And for most of the time he was standing behind that. And while he and Chino talked, I just kind of walked around the room a bit, looking at the records that were on the south side of the room. And we, it was the walls were wood paneled. It was very humble, very, very humble. Maureen reminded me that there were some seats around the edges of almost like like built-in seats around the edge of the basement. At least that's what she had told me, because she ran a daycare down there for many years. So he had to share that space with his mom and kids. That's interesting to think, right?
That's amazing.
How many children were in that space? It's another thing. Like it's funny. I'm just like thinking about that now, the energetic properties of that space because children were in it so much. He was playing for sure.
Yeah.
When we think about great 3-album stretches, one of them that comes to mind, of course, is J Dilla, who starts out with his BBE project, Welcome to Detroit. They completely redefined what people thought of him as a producer and made them realize that not only is he a producer, or he's more than a beat maker, he's actually a musician. And that completely took people out of the realm of what they were thinking JD or J Dilla of the Ummah was. And it kind of flipped everything on its head and let everybody know going forward, this is what to expect from him. And then, of course, after that, he put out the Ruff Draft EP, which was originally on vinyl. And this, again, was one of those things that made you think, wait a minute, I thought he was X, Y, and Z, and it turns out that he's undefinable. And he again started a bunch of trends and waves. And when people finally were catching up to what he was doing, he was already off on the next thing. So the Ruff Draft EP is head and shoulders above what a lot of people in the space were doing. And then, of course, unfortunately, there's Donuts, which is more than a beat tape, more than an instrumental project. It kind of transcended both of those ideas. I mean, when you think about like what people did going back for like the instrumental beat project, and then you think, all right, after you go through the DJ Shadows, DJ Crushes, and of the world, what have you, you think that there's no more room for elevation. And then Jay Dee, aka J Dilla, completely says, oh, no, you don't? You don't think so? And then he drops Donuts, which is one of the most influential projects of the past 15 plus years. And it kind of, helped people understand what was going on with like the beat culture wave that happened in the mid-zeros going forward.
Man, you just, brilliant. Thank you for painting that picture for me. I had to ask. Because when we then talk about Welcome to Detroit and the stuff he's done before that is huge with the Ummah and stuff like that. But if we're focusing on these 3 albums, I think you said something, well, what you do really well in your writing is relating these musical techniques and the polyrhythms and the science to it and the syncopation, but to the slave trade and to ragtime and to musical evolution that came out of all of that in America. So where for you does, actually, before I'll ask you a double standard question, actually, where does Welcome to Detroit in this album like run kind of fall in that tapestry of American like musical evolution, these 3 albums, would you say?
All right.
But also you are reminded that you said something about, you had a theory about the low swinging golden chain, and I thought that was a really interesting way of putting where Dilla is in the historical context. Could you break that down for me, that analogy, that theory?
Well, in yoga we have a concept, right, of the golden chain, which is a chain of teachers, meaning that somebody teaches me, somebody taught my teacher, going back and back and back and back and back. And then I'm also part of that chain going forward, who I teach to. And so there's this moment where Amp Fiddler is introducing James Yancey to George Clinton, and he's introducing him to Q-Tip. And so that's 2 links in the chain, right? Linking back, because George Clinton then goes to Bootsy, and Bootsy goes to James Brown, and James Brown goes back to, and all the way back to Louis Armstrong, right? And further back to Africa. And George Clinton is linking to Amp is linking to Q-Tip. Q-Tip and James are now part of that, and then it's going forward. All the people who have come after Dilla, like Robert Glasper and
Yeah.
you know the high people in Hiatus Coyote and Questlove and D'Angelo, all of that, right?
Yeah.
So that is the idea of the golden chain. Just to set up Welcome to Detroit. That is a, you know, I have to say at this point, the UK plays a pivotal role, not only in that album, but in James Yancey's career. I don't think this book would have been possible without the work of UK DJs and journalists, in some cases, DJ journalists. So how does this all fit in? Well, James Yancey is sort of toiling in the Ummah and doing a lot of work for not, I think, what he feels and his friends feel is the right amount of credit. In the midst of this, he puts out a homemade album by his group Slum Village called Fantastic. Fantastic is a rhythmic advancement. And it garners him and Slum Village a deal with a major label, A&M Records. And they make this album all throughout 1998. And it is on this album, which will be called Fantastic Volume 2, that also reflects this sudden shift to really straight and swung colliding in very, very jarring ways. So it's that B tape I told you about, Another Batch, which was 1998. And it's this album. And I think the reason that it's happening is because this is when James finally buys his MPC. And it's the MPC that allows that to happen. You cannot do that on an SP1200, which is what he made Running On. And, you know, I think he probably even made Sometimes on that. Right. So Fantastic Volume 2 will not come out for another 2 years, but it is very influential in the small circles around James. And that is what brings him into Electric Lady, has him working with The Roots, with D'Angelo, and then finally with Common. So he is sort of trying to distance himself a little bit from the Ummah, and he finally has this conversation with Q-Tip at the beginning of the beginning of 1999. He finally says, I just want people to know it's me. And it's a very difficult thing for James to do. It took him 3 years really to have that conversation, because how do you tell your mentor, the guy who plucked you out of obscurity, that you don't want to be in business with him? James had to be very conflicted about that. So he finally has the conversation. No sooner does he have the conversation. First of all, it takes a while for everybody to catch up to the fact that he's not in the Ummah. While he's working on Common, he's still technically part of the Ummah, but he's also being subsumed into this other unofficial collective called the Soulquarians.
Yeah.
So every credit on Common's album, like Water for Chocolate, for the 6 or 7 tracks that James did, he's credited as produced by the Soulquarians, Jay Dee for the Ummah. He's bookended in Brotherhood. He's smothered in Brotherhood. And while he's being smothered in Brotherhood, Music Soul Child is coming out with a record using his style. And High Tech and Quali are coming out with a record using his style.
Charlie Jackson.
It is around this time. Exactly. It is around this time. I think he makes his first trip to Europe in May of 1999, and he goes to the Netherlands and he goes to the UK. And in the UK, he is introduced to some very important record executives, but he also has his first interview with Giles Peterson.
Yeah.
And he's also introduced to a fellow by the name of Peter Adarkwa. Peter Adarkwa runs a small label, the aptly named BBE, Barely Breaking Even. And he does DJ compilations. He doesn't own any music. He just licenses music and has a DJ brand them. So Kenny Dope did one of the BBE compilations, right? So he has an idea that he meets Jay Dee when he's in London, and he says, I would really love to do an album of instrumental beats with you. And so they hammer out what is a very modest deal for James to do an album of instrumentals. But when Peter Adarkwa goes to Detroit at the end of 99 from London, first of all, he's never seen a city like this ever.
Yeah, that's
right?
mad.
It's surreal and a bit scary to him, and he quickly understands and encourages that James is actually going to make a solo album. JD is going to make a solo album, and he's going to sing, and he's going to MC, and he's going to have some guests on it. And so Welcome to Detroit is born out of Peter Adarkwa, this British music entrepreneur's belief that James Yancey, JD, is more than just this cool little beat producer, right? It's the first time anybody deliberately invests money in James' own particular vision, and the first time that he is going to be solo credited on something with intention, right? Yeah. There'd been some, other, like House Shoes had put out a record in '96 of remixes, that JD had done that had never come out. But this is really like his first full-length solo work. That is what will become Welcome to Detroit. But there are also some other things going on at this time, right? So JD, because of the Common album, is now enjoying his first hit in America, an R&B hit, not a pop hit, called The Light. And MCA is now offering him an even bigger deal. So that's in the wings. Meanwhile, there's another American producer named Jermaine Dupri, who starts using JD as a nickname for himself. And so it's like all of this music is coming out that's influenced by him. He barely gets his name back. And then he has to share it with this guy, right?
Yeah.
So that is when JD starts to use his professional moniker, J Dilla. And it's a nickname that Common gives to him. And the first place you see it used is on Welcome to Detroit. So it represents a break with the past. Think about his credit on Common's album, produced by the Soulquarians, JD for the Ummah. He's leaving it all behind. He's going to become J Dilla. He's going to be the star of his own album. And then he's going to do another album for MCA. And so we can talk a little bit about the making of the album, but when he finishes the album and he comes back to London for the first time in 2 years, in February 2001, he is interviewed by Ross Allen. He's interviewed by Giles Peterson. He gives two of the most extensive interviews of his career because these are guys who actually, again, see him as here, whereas the American press, hip-hop press, is ignoring him. And he declares on the BBC, he says, I don't ever want to use a Fender Rhodes again if I don't have to. I'm going to keep changing my sound. That's my word. You'll never see me stay in the same place again. And that is, it's like, it's a really important moment for him. And it is also a fantastic album, a snapshot of him in this joyous moment, stepping out to become himself in early 2001.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was long.
No, but I'm along for the ride, man. I've actually got some popcorn. This is amazing. You should do audiobooks like for just professionally, man. It's like, yeah, I'm in. But this is what I mean. This is the thing about this album for me, is when I wanted to talk to you about his feelings about the emulation, like people kind of emulating his sound. But before we do, you did go into the actual making of this album and the shift, the break. And I thought the break, you wrote it, and I was really interested to see that a trip to Dr. Dre's studio could, like, I think it was at Vanguard Studios, you were saying, really made him U-turn into like, samples. No, I'm not going to. And that was pretty huge. And I didn't know that much, that it had that much effect on him. So go. Yeah.
Well, that happens after Welcome to Detroit, right? So that it's the sort of anti-sample thing that really affects his MCA deal a bit more. It affects what he's doing for Frank and Dank. It affects what he does, as just a contributing producer for Slum Village.
Yeah.
But for Welcome to Detroit, it was for me, and it's almost like Jay Dee at his creative peak for me, right?
Right.
Because it is that old sound before he takes that left turn with Ruff Draft, right?
Yes.
You know, I don't know if I answered your question, but
No, absolutely. No. Well, the question was going to go into Rough Draft going in there, but I was thinking with people kind of like copycatting his sound. So Michael Jackson's Butterflies is out. Floetry have been around. These rhythmic patterns, as you said, are emerging. Dark Child is mining those drums. How for Dilla? How did he react to that emulation of his work?
Not good. And I say it because he thought of himself like a beat maker, right? He said to a journalist a few years later, all I know how to do is work the MPC. And I don't know what I'm doing with all these great musicians because all I know how to do is work the MPC. Meanwhile, the musicians are looking at him like, oh my God, you're the God, right? And so the disconnect there is he just doesn't know that he's not simply a beat maker. He doesn't understand the jump that he's made. So he's still thinking like, oh, why does all these people sound like me? Well, all these people sound like you because you've done something that is so jarring, so exciting. And, you know, obviously people want to you know, they want that rhythm. They want that sound. So, you know, when he hears Got Till It's Gone, you know, by Janet Jackson, he feels some kind of way about it.
Yeah.
He feels some kind of way about it so much that he starts telling people that he did it. Because that's him, that's his style. And he can't even be Jay Dee at that point. He's only the Ummah. His friends back in Detroit are making fun of him. They're like, oh, here comes the Ummah. Hey, nice to see you, Ummah. Like calling him the Ummah.
Damn.
You know what I mean? As a way to sort of support him, but still, right? And so he, you know, there was another thing that Soul Shock and Carlin did, these Danish hip hop producers. They sort of took all of his drum sounds for the remix he did for the Far Side of the song called Why and used it in this Tupac song called Do for Love.
Yes.
He's doubtlessly hearing this stuff coming, you know, the high tech stuff. And the Philadelphia stuff. And so his response is, I got to innovate the next thing.
Yeah.
And again, this is just my personal opinion. I'm not sure that any innovation he made after that quite matches up to the centenary, you know, 100-year kind of innovation of Dilla time. But they are innovations. And so what Welcome to Detroit, what you're seeing in Welcome to Detroit is you're seeing some of the most severe deployments of his time since, like Pause and Come Get It. Like those are like, I say they're like the equivalent of watching a train derail and right itself over and over and over again. But then he's also doing instrumental stuff. He does a really incredible cover of Donald Byrd's Think Twice. He does some other just incredible MC work on that album, other incredible hard tracks, like just super duper hard hip hop.
Yeah.
Interesting veering off into traditional instrumentation. And it's a warm album. It's very, if you love that warm Jay Dee Ummah sound, you're getting it on Welcome to Detroit. No doubt. Even though I'm not sure there's a Fender Rhodes. I'm not sure there is a Fender Rhodes on Welcome to Detroit, but there doesn't need to be. But it's a wonderful hi-fi experience.
Yeah.
Jump to Ruff Draft, which comes out 2 years later, after he's sort of been through this whole MCA debacle. And he's abandoned samples, right, because he's in the commercial space. Ruff Draft shows him creating something super quick, right, to get a little money from a German distributor, stuff that he likes, right? And he says at the beginning of the EP, he says it's straight from the motherfucking cassette, right?
Yeah.
So real live shit to play in your car. And so everything is jagged. Everything is kind of, the seams are not joined in that. And yeah, there is still evidence of his time sense, but there is no pretense of high fidelity in it at all. And still some amazing creative things, right? And so, now you're going to have to remind me, what is the 3-album run? So it was Welcome to Detroit.
Welcome to Detroit, Ruff Draft, Caveat, Donuts, and then Shining.
Right. So it's funny. I would actually say, because I think of Jay Dee's output, not in terms of the commercially released albums all the time, but also in terms of his batches. If we're looking at, okay, so what are the important Jay Dilla, how do we track Jay Dilla's musical evolution? Welcome to Detroit is, again, that sort of the crescendo of the Jay Dee era and the beginning of the Jay Dilla era, like Jay Dee at his peak. Then there's this period of time where we kind of don't hear from him as much. And that's because he's working on his MCA album. He's working on Electric Circus.
Yes.
He's working on Frank and Dank's album. And all of those projects in some ways are sabotaged. Right. Frank and Dank, because he makes this incredible album with samples and he decides he wants to take the samples out. His MCA album, he's not producing it. He's getting other producers to come in and give him beats. And he runs out of money and MCA won't give him any money to finish it. And that doesn't come. And Electric Circus is this sort of, and I understand it, right? The Soulquarians wanting to go deep into Fantasyland, deep into Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, psychedelic, right?
Yeah.
But there's very little songwriting on it. So that's one of the reasons that people have a hard time latching onto it, because the songwriting is not, you need something to sing along to or rap along to. And there wasn't a lot on that album. This isn't to say there wasn't good work on there. So we don't hear from Jay Dee for about 2 years. And then Ruff Draft debuts as this EP in Europe. And he's come back to sampling, right? Super raw. And then what do we hear after that, right? We hear what he's doing for J-Lib, which is, very much sort of in the same vein. I think very sort of Ruff Draft era influence. And you also have like these interesting little one-offs, like Serious As Your Life remix for Fortet, and then the Blue Note Obligato remix. So you're seeing this sort of a little bit of that high production value thing with this sort of gritty J-Libby kind of thing.
Yeah.
Dano from Freemusic Empire. Today is a special day because I get to talk about Jay Dilla. Now, Donuts was the first instrumental hip hop album that I fell in love with. Some of the other stuff was probably over my head at the age I was at, but Donuts really hit me. Jay Dilla is the master of time and space, right? Now, people who want to know about Detroit hip-hop and the sound of Detroit hip-hop, the place to start is the Sterling Toll's interview with Dad Bod Rap Pod, where he says that the legacy of Detroit hip-hop is experimenting with time signatures, with different time signatures. I got a chance to talk to Raffi, the producer from Bruiser Brigade. The first thing one of the first things I asked him was about that Sterling Toll's quote. I said, why do you think Detroit's legacy is experimenting with these time signatures, weird forms of time in these beats? And the answer that Raffi posited was that techno in Detroit is on the radio. It's just present. So is classic soul, right? Detroit soul. So that mixture of soul and techno creates an entirely different flavor that Jay Dilla seems to perfectly signify. The way you would think about it is when in America, when we listened to Dizzy Rascal when he first came out, we didn't know what the fuck was going on. But it was because London, the UK, had 40,000 subgenres of electronic dance music that had merged into the production identity. So those beats sounded alien to us. J Dilla sounded alien at the time, but that sound became what we know Detroit for. And it's incredibly regional and beautiful in everything hip hop. Love you, J Dilla. Always.
The next big thing for me after that, after he moves to LA, is not Donuts. It's the Dill Withers CD.
The Dill Withers CD.
People now call the Motown tape. Mm-hmm. That is the debut of his answer to Kanye and to Madlib. Like, oh, so y'all are just chopping anything up? Watch this. And a lot of the stuff on the Dill Withers tape will end up on The Shining, or some of it will end up on The Shining. Mm-hmm. Some of it will end up on the records of people like Steve Spacek and Q-Tip. Mm-hmm. And then in early 2005, when he gets out of the hospital, that's when he creates the first Donuts CD, which is Dilla now applying himself to Pro Tools as a music making machine. And it's a very different sound from an MPC. Still broken and blue, so to speak.
Yeah.
But very different from Dill Withers, and certainly different from like it's now the people who listen to Donuts, like the Stone Throw people, love it because they love, they're into the sort of really, how can I put it? They are interested in the more artsy, adventurous, angular, instrumental side of hip hop. Mm-hmm. They are, even though they love JD's beats, they love running. They're not trying to dangle, make running for us,
Yeah, no.
So it's like they believe that a beat maker is an artist in and of himself or herself. And so Donuts is the eventual release of Donuts is that thought form made concrete, right? We believe in the artistry of the producer, period. No MCs needed.
Yeah.
And in that time period, that last year of his life, 2005, he's really not working on Donuts. He's working on this album, Welcome to LA.
Yeah.
Right? Which is supposed to be the sequel to Welcome to Detroit. Welcome to LA will become The Shining as he gets sick. And he engages, as he did before, Kareem Riggins, helped out on Welcome to Detroit. So he engages him on The Shining. J-Rock becomes a creative partner. But the album is really not done when he dies. So Kareem kind of has to finish it. And what's interesting about Kareem finishing that album, The Shining, which comes out a few months after Dilla's death, is that two of the most popular songs on that album were not made in LA in that last year of his life. They were made at least 2 or 3 years earlier in Michigan. Dime Piece and Won't Do.
Why?
And you notice like Won't Do is like this incredibly bubbly, futuristic, landscape of a song that is a tour de force of James. It very much feels like, it almost feels like, what would come after Welcome to Detroit.
Yeah.
Right? Or what might have been on that MCA album if James had produced it himself. It's heavy to think about this stuff. I feel heavy talking about it because, my own career in the music business was filled with coulda, shoulda, wouldas. Albums that should have come out but didn't. And if it could have come out and it would have come out, then it would have done well.
Yeah.
But also James was of this character where, like, if he did it 2 seconds ago, it was old. He was relentless in the way that he masticated time, and he did work, and then he stepped away from it.
Yeah.
Anyway, again, I know that was a very, very long monologue, but
I loved it.
you know, I see, you know, I love the idea of the 3-album run because I think it comes to us from rock, you know, it comes to us from, you know, the Beatles 3-album, it's Rubber Soul, Revolver, and Sgt. Pepper, right?
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
those 3 albums, you really get like what's the most important things about the Beatles happen in those 3 albums. You know, some people don't even get to 3 albums.
They don't. They really don't. They really don't. I mean, you could go on and talk about. You mentioned Kanye. Kanye might have like 4 or 5 album run, depending on where you're coming from, really. But it's interesting that they have similarities as artists. So, although they clearly own hip hop, clearly have sampled, I love that they both broke from what they were going to do and did something completely, well, not even completely, but you know, very much changed their just attitude towards music. And that's what talking about the Dre studio thing. Thought that was massive. I thought there's one category we have, which I'm interested to see what you think. We talked about the Beatles. Get Back came out. They have an 8-hour documentary of this period. We would all take an 8-hour doc on Dilla. Of course we would. But which era, which project would you want this 8-hour doc to be around?
Oh, for one?
Yeah, or like just like a little small window in the Dilla timeline.
Well, I guess I have. My God, that's really an unfair question.
I've got my answer. That's the thing.
I would love to. Number one, I would love to have been a fly on the wall for the recording of Fantastic Volume 2.
Yes,
I think it's absolutely brilliant. Welcome to Detroit. Actually, is probably the one that has the best documentation. You know, Peter Darkwood just recently did that package, the 10th anniversary package, with you know, the oral history of the album. And a lot of people were involved in it, so there are a lot of eyeballs on it. A very dark documentary would be the Frank and Dank and the MCA solo albums. Right? Just how those two things fell apart. And then, you know, Donuts is the movie.
I'd like to.
Donuts and The Shining are the movie.
The
mythic, you know, that is the mythic tale of J Dilla.
Is that why you think he became so popular after he left us?
I think there's definitely a theory and a strain of thought that says if Dilla hadn't died, he wouldn't have attained sort of the popularity he has. You know, I feel 2 ways about this. Before he died, his rhythmic influence, Dilla time, was already pervading popular music. There's absolutely no question about it. I think it would have continued to be influential. If James had not gotten sick, I think James would have continued to innovate in ways that we can scarcely even conceive. You know, he was so. I have, if one thing I have is I actually believe that James Yancey could continue to evolve. Like, he didn't just have one thing up his sleeve.
No,
I think time put pressure on him as he got sick to continue to just try to do as much work as he could while he could. But yeah, I you know, there's a lot of good opportunities for seeing into his process.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. There was one thing, because we talk about his myth and we talk about just the story building around, you know, just his estate afterwards, his family. Is there any new music? And you hear these things bubbling all the time. For you, what are the prevailing misconceptions, would you say, of Dilla and Dilla's work?
And one of the amazing things about seeing this book, you know, when you release a piece of work into the world, it doesn't belong to you anymore. My book does not belong to me anymore. It belongs to all of y'all, right? And I think the thing that is surprising, the most surprising to me, is how people read the book. Some people, not all people, but some people will read the book and they will go read right past things, right? In order to preserve whatever myth they hold or their own personal predilections and beliefs. It's astounding. You know?
Wow, it's kind of scary.
It is a little scary. I think it's also a product of our times. It's also a big book, right? So I think it also speaks to people being able to closely read something. I took 4 years to write the book. I certainly can't expect y'all to read it in any less than 4 years. So
Yeah.
Okay, so the myths are, I think the biggest one, of course, was the "Got Till It's Gone" song, because he literally said, "I produced it."
Yeah.
He told friends that he produced it. He told interviewers, nudged them a little bit, like, "You hear? What is it? Does it sound like an Ummah record?" Right? And my reporting does not bear any of that out. And so then the question is, why would he have lied, right? And I think the answer is there, right? He was somewhat passive aggressive. He was not a person who spoke up in ways that were very confrontational for the most part. And I think it was his passive aggressive way of kind of getting back at Tip, frankly. And that's going to be hard for some people to think about, think about Dilla as somebody who doesn't always tell the truth. There was this whole narrative of him that he's humble, Yes, he was quiet and he could be polite. And I think he was quiet and unassuming. He didn't take up space in a room like Kanye, right?
Yeah.
Kanye wants to own every room he walks into. James' safe space is hanging in the corner and watching all y'all. James is just going to watch and listen.
Yeah.
But he was not humbled. This is a man who knew his worth. He was extremely competitive. He was fucking furious when people took his shit,
Yeah.
So he's not humble. And again, so what? So what? So what he didn't produce Got Till It's Gone?
Yeah.
So what that he wasn't this humble, sweet little, muffin of a guy? Like, it doesn't make him any less of a good person, any less of a genius, any less of a human being. Like, for real, y'all, get it together. And
It's true.
Him doing donuts in the hospital bed. I mean, people have been quietly saying this the whole time. Donuts was kind of done before he went back into the hospital, and people don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
They don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And I think that goes for the posthumous stuff too. There's certain things that people want to believe, and people want to act like he doesn't have daughters.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. It's fascinating when you think about it that way and what it says about the human condition, and going full circle like a donut back to the book, which is about the humanity to this culture that we have, like the process of growing up and how you grow up, and the lineage of maybe even his father had a song credit on songs that maybe he should be credited for. The myths, they don't need myths when you have such an incredible story like that anyway, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Donuts is probably, outside of On the Corner by Miles Davis, the only album without lyrics that I know front to back, like an album with lyrics. Like, I know when this phrase is going to switch up to the next phrase, and I know where he sprinkles all the little samples in, and I hear the mistakes. And it's just really interesting, like, how deeply I've connected with Donuts, even though it doesn't have traditional lyrics in it. And then The Shining kept getting delayed. I remember expecting The Shining to be what it was supposed to be, which was Dilla beats with samples from the movie The Shining, that they ended up not being able to clear. It has songs on it I really like Two Is Not Enough is a really cool song. We Must Be in Love with Pharoah Monch is super dope. I didn't really like the Common song that was on there. I liked the Black Thought song that was on there a lot. And then by the time the Ruff Draft came out, it's like, damn, I wish this would have dropped when it was supposed to, because that would have been on the heels of what he was doing with Slum Village. And that shit would have hit beautifully.
So before we end, then we talked about the albums as a trajectory and how how incredible they were for the evolution of hip hop, let alone Dilla's work himself. For yourself, we have a few categories. So if we go through these albums, and for yourself, we have categories: most rewindable moments in an album, hidden gems like tracks that, or moments in an album, or tracks that you think that maybe that deserves a bit more love, or 5 mic moments of perfection to you that you think that is just perfect. It's a 5 mic moment. You can pick and choose as we go through them. But if we go to Welcome to Detroit to begin with, is there anything on that you think that you could tackle?
Well, let's talk about hidden gems. I love the song Shake It Down. It doesn't get a lot of play.
Which was a mistake, right?
Unbelievable.
But
just
you right.
Unbelievable.
That was a mistake. That track was a mistake. It says in your book. Shake It Down was done by mistake, James says. He had a clock and what does it say here? Right, so no liar, Luke, the first thing that Neil touched, and happy ass folk song shit, just my luck. Trying to be funny, I filtered the loop and it came out and it was Shake It Down, which is...
Right, so it was more random than a mistake. He was trying to challenge himself. He said he had a beat block, right? So he's like, okay, let me get in the studio. I got to do something. Again, that work ethic, that's some Detroit shit right there. So he puts it down. It is this happy ass little folk thing. He filters it, but he puts this incredible beat behind it. And then he does this verse. It's just like, chickens be tricking to get their hair done. Yeah, son. Isn't there what? Like, just incredible rhythmic genius. So that's the hidden gem.
Love it. Love that.
Obviously, I think Pause is so wonderful because it's Frank and Dank's kind of coming out party. And I had to ask Frank the other week, I'm like, how did you think of that alphabet shit? How did you think to spelling the names out?
Right.
And Frank raps that like he's freaking, it's Biggie level. You know what I mean? Such confidence. Like, and that's forever a champion for that song.
Yeah, love it.
And Dank as well. I think the rewindable moment on that album is the shout outs at the end.
Thank you. One as well is another one where the shout outs and one for me is just one of my favorite. That's a 5 mic moment. One generally just have to shout because that beat is, as you said, the warmth and everything that come before is encapsulated that little moment of where he just he does that on Ruff Draft on shouts. I think it's the alternate version. He does something very similar, and you think he can't let it go, even though in Ruff Draft he's ripping everything apart. He still tends to do that little moment, and I love them. I love them little moments. It's little moments that he's playing the Bee Gees, man. I think he's on his way to the strip club, which is hugely important. Again, it's something we didn't get to cover, but the strip club was hugely important to Dilla. And they're just playing the Bee Gees in the back. And what Bee Gees, those moments, man, for me, just, absolutely.
Yeah.
So if we're going to Ruff Draft or Donuts, any hidden gems that you think may deserve a bit more shine, or just moments that, are just perfect for you?
Well, I mean, obviously, Nothing Like This. I think that's a real classic. Completely unlike anything he'd done before or since.
I remember. Sorry. I was going to say, Dan. I remember when I played that, and my mate said to me, "That's not hip hop." I was like, "That." It's Jay Dilla, what? He's like, that's not even hip hop. What's it on doing this? And it does hit you like that sometimes. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just have to say, you're right.
No, it's rare, but the hip hop is syncretic. It draws everything into it. So hip hop sounds very different from record to record and from artist to artist. The hidden gem on Ruff Draft for me is always Wild, which is, of course, it's Neil Innes, because I love Neil Innes because of the Ruddles, right? So
the Ruddles
was magical. Yeah, Neil Innes was the musical genius behind the Ruddles.
No, I did not know
he
this.
He also appeared in Magical Mystery Tour.
Right.
So it's Neil Innes, his son, I believe, singing and playing the drums on the song Come On Feel the Noise, which is by Slade, right?
Yeah. This is mad.
So he's like, this is my Slade song. And that's what James samples for Wild. And to me, that's just like, it's the greatest.
Do you know
when
you talk about like in the book, especially, you do it really well, like how Dilla has such an incredible way of manipulating samples into and morphing the message of that original sample into something completely different, right? And I love, and Donuts is a masterwork of all of that, right? But I always used to think he said, "This is my slave song." And I was like, oh my God, this is quite a fun track in a weird way. And then I go, this is my slave song. I was like, whoa, what? That's another level of,
wow.
As you get older,
but we don't know what James was hearing either, right? Like when, the whole thing about Fade Me in the 10cc record, right?
Yes.
Did he hear it as Save, right? I don't know. I really don't know. And that's, of course, those are the kinds of unanswered questions in art that sort of will always remain unanswered. And that's why art is, an interactive process.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And anyone who says that Dilla can't rap, listen to him saying, chain swinging like his
bring them to me, man. This is and I guess the one feeling that I was sort of limited as to how I could tackle him as an MC in the book, because number one, you'd have to use a lot of lyrics, and that means intellectual property. And we have to sort of restrict the use of lyrics, but a book is not a great way to analyze that. But as I would put JD up against any MC, period. Like,
here we go.
If I could hear him rap on something, and he always, as Jason Moran says, he always faced the beat. I know it was Jason who pointed this out. Somebody pointed it out in that song "McNasty Phil" from J-Lib.
Oh my God!
When he goes Frank Dank Dilla, and I never noticed until it was pointed out to me recently that he is mimicking what the hi-hat is doing.
On McNasty Fit. Oh my God, yeah.
Listen to it. Yo.
Damn.
And he also does it again. He does it again on Untitled, right? That boom, boom, tick with the kick and the snare. You can't stop. Can't quit.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Always facing the beat. Always facing the beat, as Jason Moran rightly says. Incredible MC.
That's the next book. The next book is just that. Just talk about the lyrics. Let's go. But yeah, that
I love how my dudes are already planning my next books.
It's just got to be more Dilla. That's all we want. No, man, no. You've done enough in this one, definitely. Right. So, but okay. So the last two then, Donuts and The Shining. We're talking hidden gems. We're talking rewindable moments. We're talking 5 mic moments for yourself. Incredibly hard on some of that Donuts, which I see as a series of 5 mic. It is just front to back, kind of perfect to me. But yeah.
Donuts is its own thing. I mean, I think I'm drawn to certain moments in Donuts. The opening strands of Stop. When you first hear that Dionne Warwick thing and the Jadakiss, that's just a moment, but also what he calls, I think he calls it Welcome to the Show. It's the one with the Motherlode sample on it. Always very sort of melancholy, even though it's a fanfare, right? He's talking about death. And on The Shining, it's, for me, it's Won't Do is just this unbelievable piece of work. It is, people always talk about Donuts as his requiem. But, Won't Do really is like future James to me. He's singing, he's rapping, he's doing this incredible melodic work, this incredible rhythmic work, this incredible sonic work. It's a soundscape, and it's a great song. And it's also totally James wanting 5 women at once.
One won't do. Yeah, two won't do. That's true,
Right.
man. That's it. Yeah, absolutely. No, and I thought the thing about The Shining that I know it gets maligned for, being 75% done. Big up Jeff Jank, by the way, before we move on, because Jeff Jank doing this work on Donuts was huge. So that for Shining, for me, it did showcase him as, I can actually make Pharaoh Monch sound like this. And I know Pharaoh had done a few things like that, but not as good as he did on The Shining. And I'm thinking of an incredibly verbose and intricate rhymer. Oh my God, you're actually just blowing me away with your voice now, just singing. And
a little story that did not make it into the book.
Let's go.
That I will tell you, and this is House Shoes' story. So House Shoes sort of owns this story.
Mm-hmm.
But James, I guess, had sent that track to Pharaoh Monch for him to, and Love, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was the Impressions track, Curtis Mayfield track, right? Mm-hmm. And that was from Dill Withers, right? That was from that mixtape.
Right.
So it started on Dill Withers, and he gave it to Pharaoh Monch. Pharaoh Monch sent it back with this sort of singing thing happening on it. And Dilla, I think he liked it, but he looked at Shoes and he's like, that is not what I wanted from him, bro.
Oh, no.
Sorry, Mythbusters.
Oh, no, Mythbusters. Oh, no. But
no, he was expecting Pharaoh.
Pharaoh.
Top 5 dead or alive,
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also think if Pharaoh Monch had done anything else on it, it wouldn't be the great song that it is. So yes. Pharaoh Monch also, he knows what to do. And so he did it.
Yes. Perfect way to put it. Absolutely. But yeah, I was going to say the creativity though, there's still creativity there. I don't know any people who just put a kazoo orchestra in the middle of that's this kind of stuff. He was still doing that kind of thing. And I thought, yeah, absolutely love it. But yeah, thank you so much, Dan, for bringing just this love, just the passion, just the insight. Thank you for the book, as I said earlier. And yeah, man, it's just been amazing. I wish we could go even longer, just talk about Dilla and get into the nitty gritty, but I appreciate you. And
we'll come back next February and we'll talk about Fantastic Volume 2.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm here. Let's do it, man. Next Dilla month. Let's do it. But I was going to actually ask you about what's next for you. I know you'd probably not even want to think what's next.
Rest. Rest is next. Well, I will say this, that Dilla Time is now going to be released by Swift Press in Britain.
Brilliant.
So we have a British publisher now. And so perfect. I hope, in the next few months to be doing more in the UK. Again, UK Dilla fans should be super proud of their role in this story. I would not have been able to tell the kind of story I had told without people like Giles Peterson and Ross Allen. And just, y'all saw things that Americans weren't seeing. And so that's a great thing. It's something to be hugely proud of. So I look forward to dialoguing more about Dilla with his people.
Yeah, man. I love it how that does happen now and again with certain artists who get that look. I remember Slum. That if you didn't, I wasn't a massive Slum fan. Just all, but the people I knew who were almost like, it's just before Stan was a word. They were that here. They're oh my God, this is like Tribe 2.0. They were, yeah. So, yeah.
Well, Marsha Ambrosius talks about, moving down from Liverpool, coming to London, going to that Slum show, I think in 99, or, and I think it was actually it was like 2000 when she saw them and just saying, that's it. That's what I want. Yeah. Next thing you know, she's in Philadelphia, doing her thing. So listen, Marsha Ambrosius played a really important role in all this stuff. And I think that's why I wanted so much to have her a part of the book. Again, just more British love.
Yeah. Oh man, I was going to end on a little thing I remember from your book where you said there was a woman who was looking at his drum machine and she was just crying at the glass case. And we don't know how far and how impactful this music is, except for our own, our own little feelings and stuff like that. So to hear and see your account of people who she'll never probably be able to even articulate what that song, what their music meant. So yeah, no, beautiful work there, Dan. Beautiful work. So before you go, last question I ask everyone before they leave. Dan, what is the last great piece of music you've heard? Could be old, could be new, just the last great piece of music.
Oh, man. Well, I will say this. I've spent a lot of time recently with Nancy Wilson and Cannonball Adderley's album. I think it's from the early 1960s.
Right.
But that, talk about a great piece of work, But also Hiatus Coyote's album, which is nominated for a Grammy this year.
Wow.
Valiant. It's a fantastic piece of work. But I'm actually looking forward to listening to more new music because I've been in the past for the last 4 years.
I run a 90s podcast. That's all. It's so. I love 90s hip hop, obviously, but after a while, you're like, oh God, there's a lot of shouty choruses in the 90s. I want to just
as my old boss Rick Rubin once said, a lot of jumping. A lot of jumping.
There is a lot of jumping. Oh, Dad, bless you, man. Thank you so much.
Right,
good luck with whatever you do, and doors are open. Anytime you want to jump on, man, let us know.
Great. Thank you, brother.
Wicked. Peace, bro.
Peace.